It's always in the news. Cybercriminals attacking great organizations, wreaking havoc on the trust of their brand.
We socialize cybersecurity for you to raise awareness.
Interviewing leaders who built and protect great brands.
We help talented people enter into this incredible field, and we share our research and blockbuster true cybercrime stories.
This is Cybercrime Junkies. And now the show. All right, well, welcome everybody to Cybercrime Junkies. I am your host, David Morrow, and in the studio today is Stacey Champagne, a insider threat professional with a long history. We're going to get into that. Also the founder and CEO of Hacker in Heels, as well as another kind of startup that she has as well. So Stacey, welcome. Thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
So insider threat, and why don't we start, let's explain to the ladies and gentlemen kind of what your current role is, who you're with, kind of just general, nothing confidential, obviously, just generally introduce yourself and let us know kind of what you're currently doing in your day job. And then let's get into some of those other kind of advocacy things that you're doing, which are really interesting and ways to help, women break into cyber and things like that. And then I want to, back up and kind of share with everybody kind of how you got here.
Sure. Yeah, so today I am a senior manager. I oversee an insider threat investigations program. It's a global program for a data insights company, really focused on building trust between consumers and businesses and whatnot for a variety of different, business needs. And so as you can imagine, data insights, we have a lot of data. We have a lot of information on people that needs to be protected, right? And so my job as the lead of our investigations function is to be able to properly conduct, investigations on people who are internal to the company. So normally, when you think of cybercrime or cyber attacks, you think of someone outside of the company who's trying to break in, steal data, wreak havoc on machines, whatever it might be, espionage, hacktivism, whatnot. But there's a whole bit of it of, having people within your company who you are trusting, and you're giving lots of access, and which, rightfully so, you need the access to be able to do the work, to build the relationships, to build the systems, and all the things that enable the business, right? And so it's almost like with great power comes great responsibility. And, oftentimes we're going to do our best to try to help people do the right thing, make a good decision, use their access appropriately. But sometimes over the course of someone's work experience, it could be something that happens inside the company to them. It could be something that happens externally. It could be, we call these things stressors, right? And so we know that, over the course of people's just life experience, they will encounter different stressors from time to time. They might end up having some financial stress. They might end up having some interpersonal stress. It could be between them and their manager. It could be with someone, unrelated, right? But we, with how much we work and how much we bring to work, it's inevitable that those things are going to affect our decisions and our actions within a company, right? And so our job investigations wise is, when those things happen, how do we properly assess and pull together the facts of, what happened, why did it happen, what could have caused this, what is our impact, what are our options in regards to remediation, and really trying to bring it to a conclusion of understanding that isn't out to get anybody, right? We're not here, trying to play the gotcha police or, the policy police. I like to say it sometimes.
You're really first looking for root cause, right?
Yeah,
that's what it seems like.
We want to understand
and to mitigate the damage, right?
Yep, we want to understand that. We want to really focus on the facts, and that can be really hard when these are people who sit next to you, right? Like these are your
Hmm.
coworkers. These are people that you otherwise have tried to build trust and relationships with. And a lot of times, and we know with insider threats, it's not intentional, right? It's someone who is trying to do for a legitimate purpose. They were tasked to, create a document, to send an email or whatnot, and for whatever reason, some sort of cybersecurity control oftentimes gets in the way of that, right? So they do something that when you're standing on the outside, or if you're standing as a security professional, you're like, oh no, like that's risky. They can't be doing that, right? But when you're that person in their shoes in the moment, and you're trying to make a decision, you think you're making a decision on behalf of the business, and you don't actually know what the impact is of your decision and your actions is. We have to take that into account when we're properly adjudicating this happen. So we are really focused on understanding that intent and then providing the information to legal, to HR, to any, the proper
I was just going to
stakeholders
say,
to
it
make
seems
a
like there's
decision.
yeah. So let
Mhm.
me ask you this. So you and your team, or what's common in this industry,
Mhm.
this group that you head up, whether it's at your specific company or others, where do they sit? Are you part of the cybersecurity group? Are you part of HR? Are you part of legal? Like, or is it are you the quarterbacks for all of them? I mean, I imagine it's almost like a racy document where lots of different people need consulted, they're accountable, they have to do certain actions. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm gonna keep it broader.
Right. Yeah,
Just
that's
out
what I
of
meant, because I didn't want to get into your specific group.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna keep it broader and just kind of touch upon it in general. And every comment that I make here today and what I share is more of the general insider threat expertise,
Yep.
not necessarily specific.
Absolutely.
I don't represent my company or anything like that.
Right.
I represent
Understood.
my
Understood.
company, but not
Right.
this other company, right? Um,
Exactly.
so in general, what we're seeing in the industry is insider threat being stuck with your cybersecurity team. And there's a lot of good reasons why, right? Like it makes sense because our cybersecurity teams often have a lot of the data that we need to be
Right.
able to conduct holistic investigations. Now, the downside of that is that you bias to a cyber lens, right? So when you're on cyber, you're really focused on like data loss prevention, data, trying to solve everything with a log and an alert and, things that are happening on the system. But in turn, you leave out a lot of the human aspects, a lot of the relationship aspects, the interpersonal, the conversations that aren't happening on computers. They aren't going through the keyboards. They're on phone calls. They're in other
Especially with
systems too.
insider threats. Yeah, and
Yeah.
especially with insider threats, right? Because
Yeah.
those can tend to be non-technical in nature, at least the actions, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of investigation into like the behavioral analysis, right?
Hmm.
So is there is there an element there? I mean, it was really interesting to me when you said we look at like a trigger, like an intervening life event, because it otherwise makes good people that have long careered, storied careers kind of do things that's abnormal, like it's an anomaly in their life because of a divorce, somebody's got cancer, there's medical bills piling up, like something happened unforeseen, and then all of a sudden you see them like starting to commingle money or whatever it might be, right?
Hmm.
What's the approach there? Is there a specific methodology that's employed in insider threat management?
Yeah, so there's a lot of really good research out there. What we typically refer to is a publication called The Critical Path to Insider Risk. And
Yep.
so it kind of walks you down from the furthest point of, far out, like what are some of the loose kind of predispositions that someone might have that would set them up to potentially take action in the future. And then it walks you all the way down to like, what are the things that typically happen right before someone does something causes harm to an organization. And a lot of those
Are
items that are
are
closer.
those?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, what I was asking is, are those kind of codified in a way? How, like, there's the NIST standards, there's CIS, there's there's ITIL for MSPs. Is the standard that you just mentioned, is it codified, or is it a behavioral practice? It's something that's common in the industry.
It is common knowledge for those in the industry, whether or not there's an actual like framework or standard around it, aside from the publication around those factors, I'm not aware of, but I do believe there might have been some work. So a leader on on the insider threat research, MITRE does a lot of work around it. And if I recall correctly, they have been working towards something similar to all the frameworks that you have mentioned around vulnerability scoring and whatnot. What would it look like for insider threat?
Okay, that's what I was asking. Yeah, because as you sit within the cybersecurity umbrella, essentially, right? Obviously, there's the MITRE attack framework, which is really kind of the standards and the framework in which threats are measured, evaluated, remediated, etc. And then there's standards for organizations like NIST and things like that. So does MITRE, and I apologize for not knowing this, I should know this, but I don't do a lot of insider threat. So does MITRE have certain elements of the framework that you guys look to? Clearly, when somebody's violating the law, all of that is codified. There's case law, there's federal, state, etc. Right? So how do those rules and regulations come in play?
Yeah, so there's two parts to this. So one is the obvious, like the legal side of things, and things that we usually have to work with are employment law. In the US, we have our computer laws as well, computer abuse and whatnot. We have to also take into mind even our GDPR and our CCPA, and understanding that while that is often geared towards when we think of it as consumers, but there's also employee aspects about it as well. So those are all kinds of factors that we look at from the legal and the regulatory side. On the other side of things, of all the different types of indicators and whatnot, and where do we kind of get that inspiration and whatnot from? There's a couple of resources. So yes, MITRE does a lot of research. There's also the National Insider Threat Task Force that provides publications. CISA has created a guide on how to build insider threat programs, very comprehensive, very holistic. Carnegie Mellon University, their CERT organization, has a repository of, I believe, over 3,000 insider threat cases, both public and private, that they refer to whenever they're publishing research and information. So that's a great place to go as well. And then you can even get into the different information sharing groups, like an FSI or whatnot, all have their organizations. And so we really do try to, there's a lot of great information out there. And then in real time too, all of us as insider threat practitioners, I would like to say we have a pretty strong community working with each other and working across the public and private lines, because the reality is like, while it seems like insider threat is new and a newer discipline in the private sector, this is something that the government has been doing and has learned all the lessons for for quite a while now. And it would behoove of us to figure out what makes sense to bring in to the private sector.
So excellent. So before this role, right, you've obviously you began a career in either IT or business, and then did you have a mentor that kind of got you involved in insider threat?
Yeah. So I was a graphic designer before cybersecurity. I was a visual information specialist for the government.
And so that and so that our listeners understand, because we get this every single day. Somebody's reaching out to me on LinkedIn or by email or on our website, and it's always the people that we have on that are in cybersecurity and that are in leadership roles like you are. They came from marketing, they came from sales, they came from graphic design. They're like, it's not like, that's why I love this practice of cybersecurity, because so long as you have that common belief in protection, right? Protecting of others, protecting an organization's brand, and you let that vision kind of drive you, there's going to be a role here for you. So it's pretty cool. So didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted some context there for you. So you were in graphic design, and then what happened? Like, how did that lead to this?
Yeah, so I wanted to further my career a little bit more in the government. And the way to do that, I thought, would be to branch out into a different field. And growing up, I'd always been part of what is called the First Robotics Program. It was a program that was put together by Dean Kamen, the inventor of the Segways, these competition programs that I was in for, 5, 6, 7 years. I watched my brother do it. And I think that enabled me a lot to not even hesitate when it came to like, oh, like what else could I do to provide more cool opportunities here in the government? Oh, well, I could go do cybersecurity. There was no doubt in my mind of like, you're a woman, you're not capable of doing it. Thankfully, because I've been brought up in such a environment where I was seeing women do incredible things with science and technology and math and everything every single day, right? And so it was almost like a seamless transition of like, okay, I'm just gonna go get my master's. I'm going to focus on cyber policy and I'm going to do this thing, right? But once I got into cybersecurity, I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. It was one of those where you have the epiphany moment of like, okay, it's not just enough to be in cybersecurity. Like, the field is so wide.
Right. Are you going to be red team? Like, did you buy a flipper when it came out and you practice hacking and things like that? Or are you involved in, blue teaming and understanding SIM tools and all of those aspects? Or is it more like policy, the GRC role, the insider threat role, things like that? So those are 1,000 different jobs, right? There's so many different subvariants there.
And so fortunately, I started with what I knew. What I knew was how to effectively communicate information. It was something I had to do day in, day out for various stakeholders of all levels in the government. And so what I did was translated that into a position where I help different cybersecurity teams document their procedures, right? So a little bit of technical writing, a little bit of visualization and mapping out whether it was vulnerability management or how we're, following our PCI guidance and whatnot, helping out different teams. And it was honestly just happenstance. It was pure luck. And I know this does happen more often than not, but it was pure luck that I happened to be in a meeting. They had just hired the director to build out an insider threat program at one of my first workplaces. And I thought, that sounds interesting. I want to know more about
cool,
it.
Right? Yeah. It's like being an investigator. It's like, well, I've always wanted to work for the FBI. This seems kind of cool. Right. So, okay. And you approached him, and what happened after that?
Yeah. So I asked her if we could just have coffee on a cadence, and so I could just kind of learn a little bit more about what this insider threat thing was and the skills that you needed to be successful and what you could expect and all that kind of stuff.
So you were brave enough to take that step. You were brave enough to take that step and ask the person to be a mentor, which takes a lot, because a lot of people are nervous about being rejected and doing that. But I'll tell you, on the other end of it, it's very, very flattering, right? Because I'm sure she's like, really? Me? Like, I would love to help somebody, younger in their career, like learn some of the roles and break in, because that's how, as you get older, that's how we kind of measure our success, by the people that we've helped also achieve. So that's really exciting. So that took bravery, and then she was receptive. So she was cool. Right. So, and you guys started having coffee, and then she kind of explained the role.
Yeah, and I just want to say it's interesting that you called it asking her to be my mentor, because there was no like, hi, my name is Stacey. Would you be willing to be my mentor?
Would you be my mentor, please?
Yeah,
of course not.
Just,
sure.
And I think what made the relationship successful is that I was very clear about the outcome, right? Was that I was trying to decide whether or not I wanted to pursue this path or not. And I think the problem that we see with other people, or just the general advice of like, go find yourself a mentor, is that people are reaching out and asking people to be their mentor without any clear goal in mind, right? It's like, I just want you to tell me how to
I
be
couldn't agree more.
successful. And it's like, how can,
Right, I
on
couldn't
the other side,
agree.
what
I
do I
couldn't agree
do?
more. I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more. And especially, I mean, people are like, "Well, all right, I've decided I'm going to go into cybersecurity." I'm like, "Okay, that's like saying I decided to go into business. Like, what does that mean? Like
Yeah.
that? Like, are you going to open up a cake shop? Like, what does that mean? Like that? Are you going to go work on Wall Street? Like, those are two different roles, and they're both business. So it's like, what does that mean that you're going to go into cybersecurity? So narrowing down, like, I'm interested in insider threat and maybe investigating it, or maybe like interviewing it, or creating policies on it. And then you can meet somebody that does that and see what they do on a day-to-day, weekly basis. What's a day in the life look like? And then decide, would you be happy doing that?
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah, it's a
So
lot less overwhelming on the mentor side of things to be approached with very specific asks as opposed
right.
to a general, like, help me be successful. Because honestly, we do all want you to be successful. But with everything else that we are also managing in our own jobs, we don't have the time to put together a curriculum for you. So
Right.
we need very specific guidance as to what exactly you're looking to excel in, and we can help you in those targeted things for sure.
Absolutely. So we have a good picture of where that's led you. Tell
Yep.
us about you have two other kind of aspects that you've developed. One is the Hacker and Heels, which is the one bringing females into the cybersecurity industry. And what is the other one? And I think I deleted it from my notes, so I apologize. Oh, Trade Secrets Network.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
what is that? Walk us through that. What is Trade Secrets Network?
So the Secrets Network it started as two relatively new colleagues. I had just moved to New York City, and I was trying to get connected with others in the insider threat community. And this individual I met at an event, and they were leading an insider threat program at another company, and I thought it would be helpful to get some perspective from another insider threat program manager, right? So
Oh yeah.
asked if we could go out and grab a drink, and when we were doing it, we had such a blast that we were like, we should invite more people. And so it just kind of grew from there, and it grew into this network of at the time, and this was pre-COVID, we would gather people together, invite other insider threat practitioners, and we would have the conversations that just weren't happening in the more formal, like, working groups, other more institutionalized, FSISAC or other gatherings, right, where you have a variety of different people at different points in their program, and oftentimes the basic questions get asked over and over again, and some people are kind of a little bit nervous to go for more of the hard-hitting questions of, like, what do I do if HR is not cooperating with me? What do I
Right.
do if I'm not able to get the indicators I need to conduct a full thorough investigation? Like, let's talk about that. We don't need to talk about which DLP solution we should be implementing. Like, we're past that. We've already decided on that. We're already going on there. But, like, these are the harder things that truly stall out our programs.
So one thing I always do on this episode is I always ask people to pause and explain some of the acronyms, right? So
Sure.
you said a DLP solution. So can you just explain for the listeners, because sometimes we have people that have engaged and reach out, and they are business owners of a manufacturing company, and they're concerned about insider threats or something like that, and they may not even know what a DLP solution is. So can you just elaborate on what that is?
Yeah, and DLP is a great one to kind of elaborate on because
Mm-hmm.
it is often seen as a stand-in for an insider threat program. So DLP stands for
Right.
data loss prevention, and
Mhm.
it's usually a tool or a collection of tools that help with how data is, usually leaving your company, right? Where a lot of times it's focused on that egress. And so whether it is emails that are going out, whether it is files that are being uploaded to places like a Dropbox or a Google Drive or whatnot that may not be owned by the company, these are the tools that are helping to filter that traffic and figure out, is this for a legitimate business approved purpose, or is this something where someone is trying to send something of ours to a place that we don't agree with where it should go? So
Or
that's
even
what DLP
accidentally,
does.
right? Okay,
Mhm.
great. So like when there's a lot of remote workers today, right? And they're working from home and they go to save some work document. They're working on a proposal for something. It's a Word document. They go and save it. They save it on their own iCloud or their own Google Drive or something personal because they think, well, I might look at it on my iPad later tonight or something like that. That could catch that, right?
Mhm.
A DLP monitoring for those anomalies and either block it, prohibit it, or at least alert from it, right? Because I think that's and some managed SIM programs will also catch that. I think those some of those anomalies if it's a certain size or whatever. But that DLP aspect is really key because that helps business owners or leaders protect against shadow IT, right? That whole users not even knowing that they're jeopardizing their company, not intending to jeopardize their company, but they're just doing it out of convenience and they're saving things where they shouldn't be saving in a company authorized drive or something like that.
Yep.
Is that fair? Is that
Yep.
a correct understanding? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right. Yeah. I mean, the whole point of this podcast is for me to learn more. So that's this is helpful. Okay, good. And then what's the other? So you built up this network of these insider threat people that are in the industry. You guys share stories, share insight connections, things like that. And then has that evolved, or how did that become the other kind of um, uh, passion project that you've developed?
Yeah, so it definitely just evolved. We had the events in person. When we reached COVID, we moved them to more virtual presence, and then started to do a little bit of thought leadership too. There was a moment though where I kind of put it on ice for a bit because I myself was trying to figure out where I wanted to go with my career. Did I want to continue to, build that expertise in insider risk management, or did I want to try to go for something different, broader, like a CISO role, right? And so as we've been kind of picking it back up, the direction that I do want to go with the Trade Secrets Network is to produce more thought leadership, to produce, really kind of bring in all of these experts that I know are out there that have fantastic things to say, could really provide a lot of information to business owners, our stakeholders, and all the different roles, because it's not enough to communicate with our CISO. We have to be able to properly articulate the risks and the threats to HR, to legal, even working with our physical security, corporate security partners as well. And when you have to, kind of get the message across to that many stakeholders, it benefits so much to have a diversity of thought leadership, and bring in and communicate out like what's working and what isn't. For that particular field, because right now with insider threat and insider risk especially, what we're noticing is we're struggling, right? And we're struggling kind of back to the beginning point question that you asked of where does insider threat sit, right? Where does insider risk sit? It's often sitting in cyber, and when you get in cyber, there's a bias against the practitioners of, you are not capable and qualified to do employee interviews, to understand legal ramifications, because you are a cybersecurity person. And it's like,
Right.
hold
You're
up a
not part of the
second.
legal. You're not part of the legal team. You're not part of the HR team.
But a good insider threat team and insider risk management program will have a diverse skill set. You will have your forensic investigators. You will also have your counterintelligence people. You will have people versed in HR. And ideally you have a hub model of, you don't necessarily need, these individuals to solely be insider threat practitioners. You'll need some of them to make the operations go. But you should have a designated person who is an expert on the HR side, but understands the insider risk aspect of it, to be part of those investigations. Same with legal and so on. And so it's just so important to educate.
Yeah, absolutely. So where does like privileged access management come into insider threat? Because I would think, when we look at some of just some top of mind breaches that have occurred, and we see them all over the news, and they happen, and they gain authorization, externally coming in to they compromise somebody's access internally, but all of a sudden from that one designer or that one programmer, all of a sudden they're able to get to like source code, or they're able to get to the financials, and all of the it's like inside the organizations aren't configured with any blocks at all, where people don't have privilege. Like, there should always be layers where you don't get to see these documents because you're not in this department, but why does this person over in that department is able to have full access once they get in? Because if they use poor password management or whatever it is, and somebody from the outside gains it, then all of a sudden, without some privileged access management in place, they have keys to the whole castle that they really shouldn't have. I would think that same concern applies directly with insider threats.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The distinction I would make is that your insider threat team, while we investigate those incidents when they happen, when it comes to the types of controls and policies and other mitigating type factors that you would want to have in place to help, prevent or at least slow down maybe something like that. We don't have a say in that, right? The best that we can do is try
No,
to
you're involved in,
influence the
yeah,
owners. Yeah.
right. You're involved in investigating it, right? And
Mhm.
saying, oh, they get access here. And then they were able, from that person's access, the way it was configured, they were able to do this. And then you guys can make recommendations that should probably be changed, right? Go look at something or some, like reconfigure that, or you guys deal with that from a technical perspective.
Yeah, and oftentimes we see too, it's a case of they had controls in place, but at some point it either, wasn't updated or stopped working, or, there was a gap in that validation of your tools. And if there's one thing that I would just want everyone to take away, that I would put on a, neon sign behind me, it's validate your tools.
Right.
Oftentimes it's we think we have a control in place, we think we have a safeguard, and lo and behold, something happens to where we realize, oh, that wasn't working like we thought it was.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we were just speaking with a CISO who was involved in a breach, and they had really good and outstanding MEDR program and EDR program, but they had the configurations wrong. Like they had made it like literally it was a button that hadn't been pushed, and it could have not only alerted them but alerted and remediated that, like the issue. But instead they just hadn't done that, and that's exactly right. They hadn't validated the configurations.
And a lot of times too,
Unbelievable.
teams aren't set up to be able to go back and do that work, right? Like we're always
Right.
concerned, we're always chasing the next threat, the next big thing. We're being pushed to go faster, further with less resources. And so validating your tools, going back and checking to make sure the door is locked 6 months
Who's got
later.
time for that? Right.
Yeah.
Who's got time for that? Right. Exactly. It's not on somebody's radar. Yeah. That's really interesting. So insider threat, when we think of all of the threats to an organization's brand, insider threat hasn't, like, the percentage of risk has been a lower one in my understanding, but it's growing in a great deal. And I don't know if that's from a lot more remote workers, a lot of the job hopping that's been going on in the last year or so. I know there've been a lot of layoffs lately, but I mean, overall, like, are you seeing what is the data, the macro view look like to you?
Yeah, so even before the pandemic, we knew historically that and the percentages fluctuate depending on which report you read, right? But somewhere
Of
in the
course.
60s to 70s, to even as high as 80s, that percentage of people would take something of a work product when they depart an organization.
Mhm.
That was happening before the pandemic. Now in the times that we're in now, where we're seeing a lot of strife and instability around job markets and people's employment and what, I think we're potentially seeing and feeling an amplification of that. One, because people are, people are moving around so much, they are getting laid off and whatnot. And two, I think that it's become a popular media talking point, right? So it's not necessarily that it wasn't happening before. It's just that I think we've picked up on a narrative as a society of this employee versus employer narrative story going on right now. And as such, they're hooking on to, these cases as they're coming up. But it's always been there. It's always been happening. But I do agree and believe that we are going to continue to trend to see a shift of, the inadvertent to the intentional malicious insider, the more that we as a society, struggle to figure out what is, the best ethical relationship between,
Employer,
people in their
employee.
workplaces. Yeah.
Yep. So I would take it then that culture plays a very strong role in insider threat.
A huge role. I mean, I always attribute it to like my goal as an insider threat practitioner, professional, leading teams, whatnot. My goal is vigilance and loyalty. So the vigilance of being able to recognize whether they themselves are experiencing stressors, whether someone is trying to influence them, trying to fish them, trying to get them to act in some way that could be harmful to the organization. And then the loyalty that when those moments come up, they choose to not take that action, right? To go and report it to their security person, to, not accept the USB device from the person meeting you at the casino in Las Vegas, which I'm referring to the Tesla employee a couple years ago, to do the right thing, right? And again, it's getting harder to do the right thing by employees with the way as we're seeing things going down recently, right? And so we need to recognize that, like, if we truly want to get ahead of the insider threat, we have to be an organization that someone wouldn't want to do harm to. And
Exactly.
that's really hard. That really
them rather
shifts,
than
shifts left. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it gets to the heart of building a security culture, right? Like a culture that is a positive culture and one that people care about the organization's brand that they serve, but also
Yep.
one that has security interwoven into the fabric of that culture, right? Because we care about the brand, security is interwoven into the fabric.
Yeah, because, you care about me, then I'm going to care about you. It's
Right.
the
Employer to
symbiotic
employee.
relationship.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this. The FBI recently in July or June, released a warning about deepfake and about deepfake. Companies, they're seeing a drastic spike in organizations being fooled by. They're hiring a lot of remote workers. They're using deepfake technologies to take these remote jobs. And then you don't have to hack the company, right? You just hired them. And then they're inside and you're giving them access and they go in. And while they're doing their job, they're also funneling data to someone else. Are you in your roles or in your industry with your colleagues in insider threat? Are you seeing that?
Yeah, it's certainly a concern. And, I think it comes down to two things. One is getting to know your and it's because there's been plenty of investigations where I'll ask for some context around an individual, like, how are they doing? How's their family?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me anything about this person? And the manager can't. They have
Right.
not made any attempt to try to understand who this individual is. So when you think of,
What do they like to do? Do they like boating? Do they like soccer? Do they go on trips with their family? Are they outdoorsy? Do they have a crafting thing going on? Like, what do they do? And there's a disconnect between managers and employees.
So trying to build that rapport could be a great, I'm not saying it's going to prevent someone from being able to pull something over someone, but it's a good way to kind of get a beat and get a feel about whether or not this is someone who is truly engaged and interested here, or perhaps has, another goal in mind, right? So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is something that has been talked about, and in fact, we had National Insider Threat Month back in September recently, and the theme of it was really around helping people develop critical thinking skills. Who would have thought, right? Like, okay, we're gonna do an entire month on insider threat, and you think we're gonna talk about tools, capabilities, alerting and monitoring, and instead we're actually going to talk about why it's really important to help people understand where they get their news from, and how to properly vet a source, and how to be able to tell whether or not they are being fed some sort of misinformation, disinformation, and whatnot, right? And so that is becoming an even more prevalent part of our evolving conversations around insider threat. That a couple years ago we were very focused on the bad person thing, and we've since realized, like, okay, we can't take that approach. It's not healthy for anybody. We need to start figuring out, how do we help people? Like, it's not, when they do something, a lot of times it's because they've been pushed into a corner, right? And just for humanity's sake, let's be mindful of that, and let's do the right thing by them, right? And try to help them out the best that we can. And now even further, we're recognizing, like, it's not because, again, they think they're doing right. They think that what they see, what they believe is true, right? And so how do you help people better identify truth? And it's a tall order, right? And then there's the debate that maybe businesses have a responsibility in that. And so I'll be curious to see how that continues to evolve.
Absolutely. So before we wrap up, share with the listeners and viewers about your initiative with Hackers and Heels, and getting females to enter the cybersecurity field, which still today, even though there's a lot of people trying to drive that, is still predominantly male.
Yeah, so Hacker and Heels, we help women launch and grow their six-figure cybersecurity careers. Cybersecurity is a lucrative business. There is a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of need for talent, and especially a need for diverse talent that can bring in, and can represent the very types of people who, use our systems, who are the hackers. Our hackers are just as diverse. Our cyber criminals are just as diverse as we all are. But also the people who use the tools on a day-to-day basis and are, trying to secure our society or trying to use digital technology. We need those perspectives to be able to properly implement security strategies and capabilities that will land right, that people will use, that people won't just, try to circumvent a control by sending it to their personal email or something, right? By taking all those factors into account. That only comes when you, have people who have different lived experiences, right? So I focus on women with Hacker and Heels, and another important part of my mission is to help people along the entire journey, right? I don't want to just show them the door to cybersecurity, because the door is just the beginning. Just getting into the building, you're still at the very start. And unfortunately, there are a lot of barriers and landmines that will come up throughout a women's technology career, cybersecurity career, that can be really difficult and can really knock them out of the game. And we see this because we see this in women leaving usually by 35. If they were started in tech, they will have left tech by 35.
Why is that?
Tenure of keeping women
Why
around.
Is that?
There's a lot of factors, but a lot of it comes down to, your pay inequity, your, level of stress and discrimination, the microaggressions, and just a lack of respect for, incorporating different ways of doing things, right? So especially like when we take risk, for example, oftentimes, and we see this in a multitude of different professions, right? And I think we can equate it, especially with like the financial sector. Usually women take a more conservative approach when it comes to risk, right? And to bring it to cybersecurity, there was actually a study done around women and men responding to a cybersecurity incident. This is in the book Insecurity by Jane Franklin. And the study found that on average, when something happens, men will just continue to do as they've always done, right? So, an incident happens.
Shocking.
We probably shouldn't have left the door open, but then they continue to leave the door open, right?
Shocking. Yeah.
Women instead change their behavior, put in new controls mechanisms to not continue to do that, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, and so it can be really frustrating when you're women and we're over here trying to say like, hey, we need to not leave the door open.
Yeah, so the behavior modification, it seems there seems to be some trending along genetic lines that you're seeing, right? Or along gender lines that are like the behavior modification doesn't occur as much in men as females.
Why is that? I attribute it to the fact that like we as women have to live our lives on guard. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth, right? There's plenty of factors out there, plenty of studies and things we can cite to around violence against women, around harassment and discrimination and whatnot. And so, when it comes to having to have that protective mindset, I mean, it's unfortunate that we have the advantage there, but let's make something of it, right? Let's put it towards good use. Let's put it towards cybersecurity.
Right. Absolutely. So we will have links to the show notes to Hacker and Heels, as well as the Trade Secrets Network and your LinkedIn information. So I encourage a lot of people to reach out to you and learn more, especially women that are looking to break into cyber. Before we go, though, I had a question. In discussing insider threat and women that want to get in, you were talking about compliance and we're talking about risk. Where does insider threat, the practice of insider threat protection, where does that sit in terms of GRC? Because one of the great paths, if you don't know code, right, you're not a coder and you don't know like the SIM tools or the red teaming hacker, code aspects, right? You can still get into cybersecurity. There's sales, marketing, management, operations, and then there's also GRC, which is governance, risk, compliance, and there's a whole host of roles there. To me, it would almost seem like insider threat would fit right under there. Is it part of it? Is it part of that curriculum?
I can't say I've seen it with a GRC function, but that's not to say that wouldn't potentially be a really good and appropriate place for it, right? Because you want to be in a position where you can't be biased or with insider risk when you're dealing with people with privileged access, as you were talking about. Those often sit in cybersecurity. They sit in cybersecurity. They sit in tech, right? And so if you could put it over with a GRC function, you've got a little bit more of autonomy to protect against any sort of bias there, right? But what I do actually see for insider threat programs, if they are sitting within cybersecurity, I see them more closely sitting with your incident response team somewhere within the SOC, within the Security Operations Center. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So, okay, that makes more sense, right? Given the curriculum, because I've gone through a lot of the curriculum on the GRC as well as the CISSP. I can see how it usually is in the SOC piece, but I'm just always curious when we talk to people involved in insider threat, I would think there would be like they're so integrated, especially the governance piece, right? It seems so integrated with insider threat and GRC. So I'm just curious how that model was shaped. So I didn't know. So thanks so much. This was really interesting. I encourage everybody to reach out to Stacey Champagne. Really good help that you guys do with helping people get into cyber, and not only once they're in, right, but helping them move along, helping them overcome some of those challenges, especially challenges that are unique to females. And we appreciate all that you do. Thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, David.
Okay, great. Thanks. Have a great night.
You as well.
Hey, well, that's a wrap. Thank you for listening. Our next episode starts right now.
Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free. And download the podcast episodes available everywhere you get podcasts.
To support our show and get exclusive pre-release episodes and bonus content, please subscribe to Cybercrime Junkies Prime.
Link in the description and show notes. And thanks for being a cybercrime junkie.